Deliberations are set to begin today in the sex trafficking trial of Sean Diddy Combs. Prosecutors and the defense laid out their closing arguments last week. Combs faces multiple charges, including racketeering. He's pleaded not guilty to all counts, and his defense calls the case badly exaggerated. CBS News legal reporter Katrina Kaufman is outside the courthouse in Lower Manhattan, where she's been following this case from the start. Katrina, good morning. So what do we expect today leading up to the start of deliberations?
Hi, Michael. So what happens before deliberations is the judge does something called charging the jury. This is where he reads lengthy jury instructions. This could take potentially hours. They seemed quite long when they were being debated last week. But what he's doing is really breaking down how the jury is going to interpret the law, apply the law to all of this evidence they've been hearing in the case, how to define certain terms. And this can be crucial to how a jury thinks about all of this information that we've heard over many weeks, Michael, and how they ultimately decide to find Mr. Combs guilty or not guilty.
And Katrina, in the closing arguments, the prosecution and the defense had their last chance to make their case to the jury. What did they say?
These were very different closing arguments. The prosecution really went methodically, laying a roadmap for the jury of how they can find Combs guilty on all of these charges, Michael. And they honestly made it seem a lot more accessible. When it comes to sex trafficking, for example, they said the jury just has to decide that there is one instance here where there was force, fraud, or coercion, making each of these women decide to have sex with Mr. Combs on a certain night. And they said that violence plus sex equals trafficking. And when it comes to Cassie and Jane, the two women who were key alleged victims in this case, there were two stories that were told where there was terrible violence that also related to these hotel nights that they would have with Sean Combs. Now, the defense took a really different strategy, Michael. He used humor. He talked about how Sean Combs was a family man, pointing out all of his family supporting him there. Also talking about how Combs is still paying for the home of one of the women who testified against him. And he really used humor to deflect these charges. He said, all of this is fake. It's personal drug use. It is threesomes. It is consensual activity. He said these hotel nights they would have were beautiful, romantic evenings that were just special time for these couples. So he painted a very different picture of the story that we've been hearing. But I have to say the rebuttal was very strong, and I watched Sean Combs throughout the closing arguments, and he looked very somber at the end of Friday.
And Katrina, before we let you go, how much jail time could Combs end up serving if he's convicted?
So with racketeering conspiracy, that is up to life in prison. With sex trafficking, there's a mandatory minimum of 15 years, and there are two of those charges. And then with transportation to engage in prostitution, that's a max of 10 years per charge, and there's two of those as well, Michael.
All right, Katrina Kaufman at the courthouse, thanks so much for joining us.